So before you upgrade to the X-T4, let's talk about shutter speed. What's up guys, Reggie B Photo here and welcome back to the channel. For those of you who are new, my name is Reggie Ballesteros and I'm a wedding photographer based in the San Francisco Bay Area. So this video is kind of a public service announcement for those who are going to upgrade to the X-T4 specifically for photography. And I wanted to talk to you guys about shutter speed. So before I get started, I want to tell you guys who this video is not targeted to. So if you are a professional shooter and you already know what you want and what you like and your preferences, this video is not for you. And also if you're into shooting video or doing filmmaking, this video also is not targeted to you either. And lastly, if you shoot with telephoto lenses or very long zoom lenses, again, this video is not for you. So, who is this video for? Well, if you are kind of new into photography or you're not exactly 100% comfortable with manual exposure settings just yet, this might be for you. If you're ever in the situation where you're taking photos of your family at home, or maybe you were at a guest at a party or a wedding in some type of low light indoor situation and you weren't exactly satisfied with the sharpness of the photos that you were taking of your family or your friends or even your clients, this video is something that you should watch prior to going over straight to the X-T4. So to illustrate things a little bit, I wanted to go over this kind of hypothetical situation. So imagine this for a little bit. You have your brand new X-T3 powerhouse of a camera and you have it paired with the 16-55 zoom lens. So it's a 2.8 larger aperture lens. And you're at your, say, niece's birthday party and they're about to blow the candles of the birthday cake. So they turn off the lights and it's a little bit darker. So you have to make an adjustment as far as your exposure settings. And because you don't really want to go into high ISO territory, you're going to lower your shutter speed to around 1/30th of a second because you're currently zoomed at 23 millimeters. So the 1/4 focal length rule tells you that this should be okay. They sing happy birthday, she blows out the candles, and you take a look at your photos and they're blurry. So now I'm going to walk you a little bit about why this happens and how we can avoid it. So when you're encountered with blurry images of people, there are a few factors that may lead to you not getting sharp photos. The first and pretty rare occasion is that your lens isn't sharp, and this is only the case if you have like very vintage lens or a used lens that just isn't quite up to a good copy. The next reason might be is that your lens or your body just doesn't focus fast enough to keep up with the subject that you're taking a photo of. Next, your aperture might be too wide open, leading to a razor thin depth of field that just can't get the subject in focus. Or lastly, maybe there's just not enough light and your ISO is too high, leading to an image that's just too noisy and kind of blurry. And for these issues, many jump to the conclusion that they can only attain sharp photos of people. So we're thinking portraits, documentary work, candids, indoor events, that kind of thing, if they buy more gear or buy gear with features that can overcome these issues that I just mentioned. So things like buying better lenses with larger apertures or faster autofocus motors and lenses with optical image stabilization in the lens. Or maybe you're going to go out and buy a faster focusing camera that has better resolution, has better high ISO noise performance, and ultimately you're probably aiming for a camera with internal in-body image stabilization, like the new X-T4. But there's one important factor that many new to photography often overlook, and that is motion. So blurry images due to motion can be a result of two things. So one is camera shake, and two is motion blur of anything inside of the frame. So camera shake basically is when small motions and micro vibrations from holding the camera with our hands will blur the image slightly. And the traditional remedy to camera shake is the 1/4 focal length rule. So basically, say if you have a 23mm focal length lens, you're going to do 1/23 of a second, and the closest one is like 1/25th of a second. From there, anything that you hand hold should be sharp and avoiding camera shake. Some people also like to be a little bit more conservative. They're using a APS-C crop body. They're going to do 1/the focal length times 1.5. And if you're really conservative, you can do 1/2 times 1.5 times the focal length, just to double it, just for that safety factor. But in recent times, there's new technology like optical image stabilization of the lens and in-body image stabilization of the sensor that have been developed to further counteract camera shake. And this basically has allowed people to use shutter speeds much slower than the 1/4 focal length rule. Sometimes people are able to handhold photos that are 1/5 of a second or even slower than that. But so far, the one thing that we haven't addressed is motion blur of the subject. So motion blur can only be addressed by two things: an appropriately fast shutter speed and flash. And in this case, flash is kind of essentially emulating a fast shutter speed. So when it comes to photographing people, documentary work, candid photos, events, especially for people with lots of activity, action going on, and emotion, an appropriately fast shutter speed is very important to getting sharp images. And even for portraits of people that are staying fairly still, the shutter speed is still important, as breathing, blinking, tiny movements of the mouth. Basically, the subject can still translate into some motion blur. So why am I talking about this? Well, it's because there is one setting that will drastically improve your photos if you haven't been doing so already. And that is to set your shutter speed to 1/250th of a second or faster for any photos where you want to take photos of people and you want them to be sharp and frozen. Obviously, if you want to intentionally blur the subject, that's a different story. And in dire low light situations, you can actually get away with dropping the shutter speed down to 1/160th of a second with a fairly good keeper ratio. Again, don't get me wrong, having the wrong shutter speed is not the only factor that impacts getting sharp photos. I totally acknowledge this, but almost everyone who sought out my help with non-sharp photos of their family members or their kids, a shutter speed of 1/100th or 1/60th or slower has been used in the photos that they're showing me. And this is the issue, the slow shutter speed. Many assume that closing down the aperture to get more in focus, or getting a faster focusing lens, or a faster focusing camera body, or sharper glass, or ultimately a camera with in-body image stabilization will solve this issue of not getting sharp photos. And yes, if you have the right shutter speed and you have one of these factors wrong, yes, you can get an unsharp photo or a blurry image. But say you bought all the best gear in the world, you have the sharpest, fastest autofocusing lenses, and you buy the brand new X-T4 with its in-body image stabilization that's going to solve all your problems, but you still set the shutter speed too slow, well, I guarantee you, when you take photos of people, your photos will be blurry and they won't be sharp and they won't be frozen. Motion blur is just a fact of life when it comes to photography, and you have to account for it only with shutter speed. So I challenge you, with the gear that you currently own, spend a day, a week, a month, whatever time frame you need to convince yourself, and stick to 1/250th of a second or faster when taking photos of people, your friends, your family members, your clients, and only resorting to 1/160th of a second for those very demanding low light situations. I'm almost certain if you've been doing everything else right and you've not been happy with the sharpness of your photos of people, this setting will be the silver bullet that you've been looking for. It's not going to be in-body image stabilization or a camera like the X-T4. And the best part about mastering this setting is that you don't need to buy new gear to make this change. You simply just have to take control of choosing the shutter speed intentionally. Please practice this and master this first before going out and just buying new glass or upgrading to a camera just because it has IBIS. And to kind of further illustrate this point about how important shutter speed is to me and in general with portraiture or taking pictures of people, even if I personally had the X-T4 and I had IBIS at my disposal, I will still be shooting at 1/160th of a second at 12,800 ISO as opposed to 1/30 of a second at ISO 2500. I know you're thinking like, why would you shoot at such high ISO? But that's because there's no amount of in-body image stabilization that will freeze a human subject. And for me, freezing the motion of the subject is way more important than any type of trade-off as far as noise goes in the image. So, what are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comments below. And also, why don't you take a guess? Do you think that I'm personally going to buy the Fujifilm X-T4 and switching from my X-T3? As always, please subscribe if you haven't already. I make a new Fujifilm or photography video every week. But if that's too long, go ahead and follow me on Instagram at ReggieBPhoto, as I'm posting new tutorials, workflows, tips throughout the week. Alright, that's it for me. Remember to get out, go shoot, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.